Um,
All right, can everyone hear me? Try chatting in the chat box. Yes, no, maybe so. Okay, well, I'm going to start out because I think my mic should be working. We're just going to talk about some basic research methods here to start off with, and then we'll move on to more advanced stuff so that the advanced debaters involved can also learn some new things. So we're going to start off by, for the new people, what is a negative brief? What does it mean to research and write a negative brief? And what's involved in that whole process? Well, a negative brief is like a collection of arguments backed up by evidence against a specific position or argument. So usually you'll be writing a negative brief against a specific case that you know exists out there. And when you write your negative brief, you're basically developing evidence and quotes that you can use, credible experts or people that you can quote in order to display your point. So, evidence is extremely important in a negative brief, and that's pretty much what mostly what the negative brief is consisting of. I'm just going to show off what a sample negative brief might look like. Give me a second here. Just so you get a visual of what it might look like. Meanwhile, I'll just show you Google is the destination of choice for a researcher because it's definitely the best search engine, and you can pretty much find anything you need to know on Google. So I'm going to be using Google throughout this entire webinar, as well as the brief template that I've developed for potent speaking. Microsoft Word is slow right now. By the way, the reason there were technical difficulties is because it's really windy out here and the power kept going on and off. So I literally got Simon Sebzik, who lives like 15 minutes away, and I'm using his laptop to do this webinar. So there might be some issues, but hopefully it'll run fairly smoothly. um, Microsoft Word is taking a while to open up, so let's just first talk about how you would expect to start your research session. So if you want to start out and start researching, what do you want to type in to start your session? Sometimes you can get kind of like a writer's block or searcher's block in that you don't know how to start and where to begin finding arguments. So for an advanced debater, usually you just start with the arguments that you want to run. So if you have some stock issue arguments or disadvantages, you'll just type those in, try to see what you can find against the case. But if you don't have arguments, then you need to be able to develop them or just get some background information until you do have arguments. So for advanced debaters, you might go through the stock issues, say, hey, is there a reason why this plan might not work, solvency? Or maybe there's a reason why these problems don't actually exist in the current system, inherency, etc. Or you might go through some possible disadvantages that you've come up with and try to see if there's any evidential support for them. You might ask yourself, why are things the way they are? That's a really good question. Why are things the way they are? Usually, our government has thought about whatever issue the affirmative team is going to bring up, and they've chosen not to do it for some reason. Now, the affirmative team might not tell you that reason, but if you can come up with that reason or if you can find it online, then that'll help you in your debate round. You can also look through footnotes on different articles that you're reading to come up with more arguments so that you can research even more. For a novice debater or someone who doesn't, even an advanced debater who doesn't really know much about the topic, you're going to want to go to a website like Wikipedia and start reading up on it. So, for example, I was researching plea bargaining recently, and so I wanted to find out more about them. I kind of knew a little bit, but I wanted to find out more about the process. So I just Googled plea bargaining and found the Wikipedia article, and then I just read through it a little bit. So it just gives a basic overview of what a plea bargain is, gives you maybe some alternate ways of saying plea bargaining, and then it has this nice table of contents so you can see what to expect. A lot of Wikipedia articles have a nice section called controversy or something like that, maybe critical acclaim. And so the controversy section tells you some arguments against and for plea bargaining, oftentimes. And other articles will have a section like that. So you can find out what is kind of the deal with plea bargaining, even around the world, Georgia, Poland, Italy, etc. And that gives you a good idea of what plea bargaining is, and it gives you some ideas for what you can research. So I love using Wikipedia to start off my don't know much about the topic. The other thing you can do is go to news.google.com, and that's also a fantastic resource because it basically pulls a bunch of news sources together and uses the um, Google engine to do so. So if you search plea bargaining on news.google.com, you might see some recent cases that have to do with plea bargaining. So those are both excellent resources, Wikipedia and Google News, for starting off your research session. Now, if you are still stumped, a great way to do this is if you already have some evidence from the affirmative team, maybe you hit them in a debate round and now you have some credentials of their evidence and you can find it, then look up their evidence. Because when you look up the affirmative evidence, you'll see some articles. Some of them won't really support their case as much as they seem to in the debate rounds, so you can use that against them. Or they might reference another article that says the exact opposite. And it's good to see what the affirmative team has in terms of evidence, because then you can see what you need to get as negative evidence in order to beat that. So it's really good to know what your opponents are using. And so I really like using affirmative evidence to start off my research session if I do have that. So when you go to tournaments, make sure you write that down so you can use it later for research. All right, so how do you do basic research? Well, we just go to Google, type in a search term, and press search. It's that simple. But there's a few ways that you can improve your search terms and get more out of searching on Google. So I'm going to talk to you quickly about some search operators you can use. And search operators are basically like commands that tell Google to do things a certain way. And these will hopefully be helpful in teaching you new and advanced methods of searching through Google. Now, you could start off your search by saying plea bargaining and just see what you have, right? Look at the front page, see what the general sentiment is. Um, but with that method, you're not really going to get anything in depth. Oftentimes, if you search a topic and just click enter, you'll get a lot of definitions and stuff like that. Nothing that's really an argument. Occasionally, you'll get a useful article. So you need to actually search for something specific. So maybe you search for plea bargaining pros and cons. That's a good way to start out. Maybe you'll see what the affirmative team is likely to argue. You'll see some things the negative team could argue, advantages and disadvantages of plea bargaining, etc. So you can get some results that way. But once you have an argument in your head, then you can start going down deeper. So an example is I want to search for plea bargaining should be banned. I want to see if anyone says that. So the first result is debate.org, which is a debate website, but you can kind of ignore it because it's pretty poorly done. First result here that's useful is a ban on plea bargaining, unethical abuse of discretion, etc. So that's interesting. That might be negative evidence. And I'll hold control and click so that it opens in a new tab. And it's a PDF file. So it might take a little bit to load here. So this is a study about a a ban on plea bargaining in New York, etc. So you just search for something more specific with search terms like this, and you'll start to get better results. But now let's jump into the search operators. The first one is the minus sign, just this. The minus sign is really useful because what it does is it tells Google whatever is following the minus sign should not be in my results. So for example, if you want to look at results about the 2016 election, but you don't want to hear about a certain candidate, you want to specifically focus on other candidates, then you can use the minus sign. So if I search 2016 election GOP, you'll see that it's talking about something about Jeb Bush, etc. And on certain days, everything will be about Donald Trump. So if you want to remove Donald Trump from the results, you can just go minus sign Trump. And it'll make sure that Trump doesn't show up in the search results. So this is great if you're searching a topic that's overshadowed by something else, then you can remove that other thing with the minus sign. The next one is using quotes around a phrase. So just putting quotes around a phrase. And what's useful about that is Google will search for that specific phrase exactly, and no results that don't have the phrase in that exact order will be shown. This is great for finding obscure evidence that says exactly what you want it to say if you haven't already found it already. I said already twice there. One example I have here is I was searching for a well, plea bargaining was banned in Alaska at one point, and I wanted to find out more about that and whether it worked. And I found out from another article that charge bargaining, which is the form of plea bargaining, increased in that experiment. But I wanted to see if any article specifically said that. So I searched quotes, charge bargaining increased. When you're using quotes, you want to make the phrase fairly small, otherwise you're unlikely to find something that actually says that. And lo and behold, I found 5 results that said that. And the reason I'm showing you this is because I was really positively surprised by one of the search results I found. This one, which is, oh wow, I'm going to use a lot of data opening that. But anyway, when that opens, it's this article that's basically a scan of some kind of court documents or something from 1983. So it's a really, really old article, but it's literally scanned like microfilm and uploaded in a PDF online. And it was extremely obscure, but I found it just because I used the quotation marks. And I'm just going to close it because it's not worth opening if it wants to close. Maybe it doesn't. But it was obscure, and I only found it because I was willing to try to use quotes around the phrase and try to see if I could find something that specifically said charge bargaining increased. And I ended up finding good evidence here. So while I wait for that to load, the next one that you can use is or, capital OR. And that is useful. Okay. Oh, now it closed. Great. So I loaded it just so it would close. Anyway, so you can use or to search for several alternatives. I use or a lot when using quotes around a phrase because maybe there's 3 different ways they could phrase it, but I still want to search for all 3. So for example, you could search for soda or pop. Use capital OR, and this will basically serve up results that talk about both versions of the word. But a more useful example here is maybe Alaska. Okay, I already have it written here. Alaska plea bargaining, quote, charge bargaining increased, end quote, or plea bargaining increased. So that's saying results that have to do with Alaska plea bargaining and, oh, I didn't use capital R. Sorry, this computer is kind of slow right now. But when it works, if it works, plea bargaining increase. Okay, I'm not really sure why this is not working right now, but usually it works. And well, here we go. It says no results found, but there are results. Um, it says Alaska's ban on plea bargaining increased, etc. And also there will be results where it said charge bargaining increased because I'm using or to say either of these options is fine. So or can be useful, especially when searching several phrases at a time. The next one you can do is cite with a colon. That's important because if you want to search for results in a specific website, then you can specify. So, for example, cite NewYorkTimes.com, and all the results will be from that website. And you can add a search term ahead of time. So, plea bargaining, cite New York Times. And there we go. Everything that New York Times has written about plea bargaining. The other useful use of this is instead of writing a specific website, you can write a specific website ending. So, for example, educational websites or like colleges will use .edu as their end, edu, and you can do cite edu, and it will only return ones that have an edu ending. So those are going to be more credible than your average website. So that's another useful search operator that you can use. The next one is file type, and then you do a file extension like PDF file is portable document format or something like that. And generally, a lot of um, experts or people with PhDs will write journals or articles that are credible and peer reviewed, and they'll put them in a PDF file and upload them online. So a PDF file usually means it's something really cohesive or well written, article that's really credible, etc. Most PDF files online will be that way when you're searching for topics like this. So if you search for plea bargaining file type, then you'll get only PDF files that have to do with plea bargaining. And that's great because these are all going to be more credible than your average website. So that's another one that I use a lot. You can also do doc or docx for Word documents, or maybe if you're looking for PowerPoint, PPT or PPTX. But usually I just use it for PDF. There's not really a reason to use the other ones. Okay, the next one is date. Let's search for plea bargaining. You go to search tools on Google, anytime, and then click custom range. And then you can choose, let's say I want news from 2002 about plea bargaining. So this will search for everything in 2002 written about plea bargaining. Now, this may not seem useful at first, but you can also say past week or past month. Excuse me. And with that, you can only get recent articles about plea bargaining. Does plea bargaining add to criminal court caseloads? And this is a recent article. All of these are going to be within the last month, and that can be extremely useful for making sure you find relevant recent stuff. You can do past year or past 3 years with a custom range, whatever. The other use, besides finding recent stuff, is sometimes an event happened a long time ago, let's say in 1995, and you want to find out specifically what people thought of it or what articles came out about that event back in 1995. And usually you're not going to find that because Google will usually try to get you recent results. So if you search for that event, it'll tell you what people are saying about it right now. So, for example, if you looked up September 11th or the Twin Towers, you'll get recent results about it, maybe about the reconstruction or about a memorial service, etc. But if you were to go click custom range and choose, then you can see articles that were written the day it happened. And so you get a different perspective. I've used this in the past for, let's say, Alaska banned plea bargaining, and I wanted to find out what articles were written about that topic when it was banned, what people thought about it, etc. So that can be useful as well. The last one is all in title. And what this does is it forces things that have all of these search terms in the title of the article. It only works when Google is working on Simon's laptop, but when it does work, it can be really useful. Here we go. So it'll only search for terms that have it in the title of the article. This is useful because sometimes you're trying to search for something obscure and it's not, you're just getting a bunch of results that only mention it but don't really talk about it as the topic of the article. So all in title really helps with that as well. Okay, so let's move on to overall search tips. You've already seen some search operators. So, what are some general tips that you can take away from this on how to search Google effectively? Well, the first one is don't worry about grammar. Google doesn't really care about grammar unless you're looking for a specific phrase with quotes around it. It just cares about the words that you're going to use. So, if you want to, well, I mean, saying Alaska plea bargaining, that's just kind of a sentence fragment, or even saying plea bargaining Alaska. But they're going to return the same stuff because Google doesn't really care about the order as much as the words that you're using. So don't worry about grammar when you search Google. The other thing is adding too many words in order to make it grammatically correct can cause more problems. So, for example, if you searched, how do you make pizza with a lot, you're just gonna, that's just kind of a huge search term. Instead, you could do pizza, and you'll get similar results without having to type all of that. So, you don't have to worry about grammar when you're searching. The next is that less is more. If you add a bunch of words and not just transitionary words like is or and, but important big words that Google is going to search for, then you're going to confuse Google and you're going to find less results. So when I search for Alaska plea bargaining, but I searched for Alaska plea bargaining didn't ban didn't it's kind of confusing. Right here, it'll find a work over here, a ban over here. So it's not like you're actually going to find this specific thing. So sometimes writing less is more. The next is that Google can be political in the sense that they rank certain websites higher for having higher reputation. And so if you are searching for something that doesn't have a lot written about it, sometimes you'll only get the opinion of New York Times or big websites like that. But sometimes the website that has the actual result you're looking for is further down. So I would encourage you to be willing to go down to the bottom of Google and search the next pages. Most people, I heard a statistic that 80% of people click on the first link and then it goes down and down and down. The next few links on the first page barely get any love. And almost no one goes to the second page of a Google search because they're not really looking for anything with that much zealousy. But as a researcher, it's your job to do that. Next is to put the writer's shoes on. Instead of phrasing your Google search as a question, phrase it as something that a writer would actually say in an article. So I have an example here. if you search how much do people hate Mitt Romney, that's just a question. It's not as if you're going to find a article written that has that as the title. Instead, you might say study shows people hate Mitt Romney or something. I don't know why I use Mitt Romney. It's not like people hate him, I don't think, but that's just an example. So put the writer's shoes on and search based on how you think the writer would actually write that article. The next one is to know technical words or alternate terms for your search. So plea bargaining has several different names. You can call it plea deals or plea negotiations or charge bargaining. These are all technical and alternate terms for plea bargaining. Charge bargaining is a form of it. So if you only know the word plea bargaining, you're only going to get certain results. But if you search for something like plea deals, you might get totally different results. So let's go with all entitled Alaska. Man, this computer is messing up a lot.
Sorry.
Simon's saying sorry. I think I forgive him. Okay, so you have 101 results. This is the kind of result you get. But what if you write Alaska plea deal? And what if, okay, it worked. We have 138 results, and they're different results. These are mostly results talking about specific cases of people getting plea deals. So using a different term for the same thing will have different results. Finally, try a lot. Don't just give up on your first search, especially if you're looking for a very, very critical piece of evidence or one that you can win the round with. You need to be willing to try a lot of different search terms, try them repetitively, try using quotes, try using all in title, try all kinds of combinations until you find what you're looking for. So I was writing a brief against abolishing plea bargaining, and I noticed the case of Alaska banning plea bargaining, and I saw several articles saying that it worked and that it was a success. And I thought, there's got to be one article out there at least that says it wasn't that good. So I searched for a while, and it took a long time, and I had to do a lot of looking through footnotes and digging. But then I found like 5 or 6 different sources that said it wasn't as good as those other articles said. So the moral of the story is be willing to try a lot of different combinations until you get what you're looking for. All right, so once you found the piece of evidence that you're looking for, you have to actually cut it. And cutting it means getting it from the article and into your negative brief. So finally, this brief opened while we were talking, and this is what a sample negative brief looks like for those who don't know what it looks like. You have here the title and the author. Then you have the table of contents. This shows you what kind of stuff you can expect in the negative brief. And as you go down, you see evidence. So here we just have basically a section title and another subtitle. It's basically like a header for organization purposes. And then you have what's called a tag, which is basically saying this is what the evidence says. And you have a citation. This citation is too small. It doesn't have all the information it should. So I'll skip that one. Here's a typical citation. You'll have who wrote it. You'll have the date. You'll have credentials in parentheses here for this person or this organization. And then you'll have maybe published by this person. That's not really necessary, but it can be useful. Depends. And then you have the title of the article, and then you might have the date again. I usually keep the second date out because the date is already up here, and you'll have the URL. So we'll go through that more a little bit later, but this is what it looks like. That's the citation, and this is the actual quote. You'll notice that some parts are underlined and others aren't. That's because the author of this evidence wants you to read this part, and this part doesn't matter as much. This is included as well for context because it's important to make sure that you have proper context in all of your evidence so that people can verify that the author is saying what you actually say they are saying. So this is what a brief looks like. And I'm going to show you Oh, I just realized that this entire time I wasn't showing you that on my screen. I'm sorry, guys. That's embarrassing. Let's try this again.
How many pictures do you
I don't know. Yeah, my first time doing this is kind of gonna be a little rough. Let's see if I can find the screen to show you. Okay, I think now you're seeing it. Yes. There's the negative brief. Sorry. I've been talking this entire time about it and you had no idea what I was talking about. Okay, so let's start again. This is the title, table of contents. We have some headers and the tag of the evidence. So this is a tag up here. This basically says what this evidence is going to say. And then you have the author, the date, credentials, etc. Some more citations. And then you have the actual body of the evidence. Whoops. So there's that. Sorry about that issue. Okay, so that's what a negative brief looks like. And what we're going to do now is we're going to cut a piece of evidence. I'm going to try to just share my screen as it looks instead of a specific. Okay. So now you're seeing everything I'm showing you. Okay. Let's go to an article about plea bargains. Just for an just go to PBS.
have they seen the screen at all?
Hmm?
Have they seen the screen at all?
Yeah. Okay. So let's just grab this quote. I'm not going to try to find something specific that we would actually want to use, but just for demonstration purposes, we're going to cite this. So I'm going to open up my brief template and go back here. So we have the Sixth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, etc. We're going to copy that into this paragraph right here. So the evidence is here. Now we need a tag and a citation. This is a sub tag. It's not really necessary, but it might be useful in some circumstances. We're going to take it out this time. The tag, let's see what it actually says. Right to a fair trial. Okay, 90% of cases don't make it in front of a judge. So that's what the evidence is saying. So the tag is just a summarization. Let's go back, find who the author is, Gretchen Gavitt. So if I hold Control and click, it'll open up in a new tab. And there's nothing written about who he is, so we have to do some digging. Open up Google here, Gretchen Gavitt. Sometimes it's difficult to find. Okay, so we have Harvard Business Review. He's worked for PBS. And he's an associate producer for digital media at PBS. So obviously this is just a reporter and not someone super credible, so you don't have to worry too much about what you write for his credentials. Just write some here. And then the other part was that he was an associate producer for digital media at PBS. Frontline. She. My bad. Not paying attention here. Just paste that in there. And then the title of the article. I grabbed the URL. Let's put the URL right there. And the title is The Problem with Pleas. pastes in the wrong format. So what you can do is click over here, paste, and choose keep text only. The problem with please, there we go. So that's what our cut evidence looks like. You might even say more than 90% never make it in front of a judge or jury. Choose quote read all. That's the style for the part that you read, and choose just quote for the part that you don't read, which should be one lower. And there you go. That's our cut evidence. So for the novices, I hope that kind of helps visualize what it looks like to cut evidence. All right, so let's move on to the next part, which is workflow and various tips. So this is going to help especially the advanced people. The first one is keyboard shortcuts, which advanced people probably know, but let's just start off with that if I can find my mouse. Okay. So the first one is Control F. If you are looking for something specific in this, while proponents say the agreements give defendants options. Okay, so I want to find this specific phrase in the article. Sometimes it's far down. In this case, it's probably at the top, but let's search. So you press Control F and search while proponents. Oh, here we go. And it'll show you, this find bar will show you where it is in the article. That's really useful if you open something from Google and you can't find the phrase that you found on Google in the preview and you just want to see it in that article. So here we go. The next one is Control plus C and Control plus V. So Control plus C is copy and Control V is paste. So I just use that with my keyboard. The next one is Control plus Enter. That adds in Word, that adds a page break if I press it. So basically, it'll go to the next page and I can start something on the next page. That's sometimes useful for formatting a brief properly. The next one is Control plus X. Control plus X is the same as Control C for copying, except that it deletes it from the source. So on a website, it doesn't make a difference because you can't delete something from a website, but you can in Word, for example, press Control X, it'll delete it as well as put it in your clipboard so you can paste it later. So there you go. The next one is Alt plus Tab on your keyboard. This is all for PC, obviously. Mac users figure it out, I guess. For PC, Alt plus Tab lets you see everything that you have open, and that's really great for switching windows quickly. And what's great is if you're on, let's say you're on Internet Explorer, you're alternating between these two quickly. Instead of opening it up and looking, okay, where is it? You know that as soon as you let go of Alt again, it'll switch directly to the previous window. So just pressing Alt-Tab really quickly switches you to the next window. Really, really useful for cutting evidence because you'll say copy, you'll Alt-Tab, and then you'll paste. So that's really useful. The next one is Control-T. That opens up a new tab in most browsers. That works in Google Chrome, Firefox, and Internet Explorer as far as I know. So that's great as well. And the other one is when you're clicking on a link, like this one, holding Control while you click opens it in a new tab. This is important because if you see something like, oh, okay, this is another article that they're talking about, if you just go to it, well, in this case, the website is sending me automatically to a new tab. But if it had not done that, then I would be on this page now, and I would have to click back to go to the previous page. And if you keep doing that, eventually you'll get lost and you'll lose all the articles that you had gone through. So if you want to make sure that you keep this article as well as this one, you hold Control and it'll open up in a new tab. Holding Shift and clicking will open it up in a new window. And the last one is if you have one screen. I have 3 screens at home, 3 monitors attached to the same computer. So I can have a browser in one screen and Microsoft Word on another and something else. But instead of doing that, Let me just check. Okay, just making sure you can actually see my screen still, because that was an embarrassing snafu. Um, if you use the Windows key and press one of the arrow keys at the same time, it will send it to a different tab. Excuse me, not the screen here. And then on Windows 8 or Windows 10 in this case, it'll let you choose a different window to have on the right side. On other versions of Windows, it'll just put it on the side, and then you can grab another window and put it on the other side. So Windows key plus the left arrow puts it on the left, and then on the right, you press right arrow. That's a great way to have two screens open at the same time. The other way is you can just go like this and hit it against the side. By holding the bar, hit it against the side, and it'll open up that way. Okay, so those are some keyboard shortcuts that are useful. I'm going to skip the brief template keyboard shortcuts because we don't really have that much time to cover that. So basically, the brief template that I made for my website, which you're seeing right here, has a lot of useful things included, features, and one of them is that it has keyboard shortcuts. And these are listed in the brief template itself, so you can look at that later. I also have some more information about it. After the webinar, I'll be sending out an email to everyone. Basically, well, some of you aren't subscribed to my website, so I'll send an email as well as comments on the webinar page. I'll get it to you somehow, a link to the brief template and some information about it. I'll probably be making a video explaining it, etc. So I'll make sure that you understand how you use it. The reason why you might want to use a brief template, by the way, is because a lot of clubs don't have one. Many clubs do, but some clubs don't. And the ones that don't are missing out because it may seem restrictive to use a template. It sounds like something that would make it harder to do, but it actually makes things a lot easier because everything is consistent. If you open up this sample brief here, every piece of evidence looks exactly the same, and it's nicely formatted. No evidence is skipping onto a second page. It just all looks really nice. If you were to use no brief template, then you get a bunch of briefs that look kind of weird. Maybe this font will be different from the rest, and so it just gets confusing, and it's hard for your eye to use it in a debate round. The other nice thing is this brief template that I'm using has automatic numbering for the evidence. So that means you can refer to the evidence in your notes, maybe when you're flowing, say, read card number this. And you can refer to the evidence through the number, and that's a really easy way of doing things. The other nice benefit is the table of contents. Because of the way that this is built, every time you add a tag, it'll show up in the table of contents, or add a heading, it'll show up here. So I don't even have to do anything. You just have to go update field, update entire table, and it'll update. So that's another useful feature. A lot of people don't use table of contents, or they only use manually created table of contents, which can take 30 minutes to do, and then you have to change it every time you add evidence. So brief is really helpful. All right, next is some workflow tips. So if you use Microsoft Word, okay, actually, let's start again. If you don't use Microsoft Word, you should. If you use one of those free alternatives like OpenOffice, you're really missing out because Word files, I think, can technically be opened by it, but there's limited compatibility. It really ruins the look of your briefs, and it's just, it's definitely not optimal. So I know Word can be pretty expensive, but a lot of laptops come with it free now. There's a lot of options for trying to get it. Maybe I think there's student pricing as well. So try to look into a way to get Word because it is pretty important. If you have a Mac, there's Word for Mac as well. A lot of people also try to use Google Docs online. That also is suboptimal. In fact, Google Docs is one of the worst because it's an online, Word document processor. It's not really that robust, I guess you could say. The table of contents functionality is pretty poor. Briefs that, let me put it this way, every time I see a brief that was written on Google Docs, it just looks bad. It just looks poorly written, and it just doesn't seem quality. So Google Docs, those other free alternatives just aren't as good. So anyway, an option that you can do for Word is you can by default paste without formatting. What does that mean? Well, when you're pasting from a website like I was doing earlier, let's go to the title here, the problem with please. If I copy that and open up here and paste it like I did last time, it pastes in the format of the website, and so that totally messes things up. And now, I would have to manually change that. So instead, I want to paste it without formatting. But so what I did last time is I clicked here. But that's kind of time consuming. So what I've done on my computer, Simon's doesn't have that right now, but I'll do it for him as well. If you go to options in Word, file options, and then I believe it's in advanced. Yes, cut, copy, and paste. There's options here. So pasting from other programs is what you're looking for. By default, it says keep source formatting, which means whatever the website font was or whatever size it was will be pasted into the document. Instead, you can click keep text only and click OK. And that'll mean when I grab it again, copy, paste, it pastes in the right format. So that's really, really useful. And I would encourage you to change that option in Word. The next one is a extension for your browser called TabCloud. Now, Firefox wasn't working earlier today. Let's see if it works now. Still doesn't. For some reason on Google, it doesn't let me reach Google right now. But on Firefox and on Google Chrome, and maybe Internet Explorer, I'm not sure, there's an extension called TabCloud. And what TabCloud does is it allows you to save the tabs that you're using. Once you log in, you have to log into your account, which I can't right now because it's through Google, which is not working on this browser, which is annoying. But basically, you would click this button once you're logged in, and it would save your current tab. And then if you went to a different computer and had that TabCloud extension, you can open all the tabs that you had open in the other computer instantly. And this is really useful because when you're researching, you're going to have like 10 tabs open or even more. And so if you don't want to lose those, oftentimes you'll close the browser accidentally and say, oh man, I lost all of my tabs. And sure, there's recovery options, but maybe you want to use it on a different computer, etc. There's a lot of reasons you might want saved tabs. So TabCloud is really useful for that. The next one is an extension called Pocket. It's right here. And Pocket is also an app on your smartphone. I would say it's only useful if you use the app as well. And basically what it lets you do is you save an article to Pocket, and then it's available offline once you've downloaded it on your app. So you can read articles offline as well. And it might just be an easy way to store things. You can also organize by tags. Let's see. I have to sign up with email right now, or sign in. So I'm not going to do that. But you just click this button and it saves it. You can quickly write a tag to categorize it, and then it's saved. The next one is AdBlock Plus. And that is probably the best extension known to any browser. Let's see, I'm just going to use Yahoo search. Oh, man. Here we go. What AdBlock Plus does is it blocks all ads, as you can see. And once you have it installed, and it's really quick to install, you will forget that ads even existed anymore. You'll go to articles and you won't see those weird ads like lose belly fat in 20 minutes type of stuff. It also blocks YouTube ads. So AdBlock Plus is really, really useful. It's also good for shielding your eyes because some ads can be pretty weird. So I really, really encourage you to get it. There's no downside as far as I know. I've never blocked an ad that I really wanted to see. That just is that even possible to want to see ads? So AdBlock Plus is really useful. The next one is tree style tabs. This only works on Firefox. Um, so if you don't want to use Firefox, it might not be worth switching to Firefox for it. But I'm actually using it right now. Instead of having the tabs on top, like let's say Google Chrome does, on Firefox, I have it set up like this. And so what's useful is if I open up a new tab, it gets categorized under the current tab. And so let's say you're on an article and you open up several tabs under it, it'll show you your path, which can be really useful, and then you can close it. So if you have tons of tabs open, you can collapse them, and it's just a good organization tool for researching. The next one is Wired Marker. This one is a little bit wonky sometimes, but I used it to good effect. Here we go. And basically what it is it's a web highlighter. So you can highlight certain text on any website and it'll save on your browser so that next time you go to it, it'll look the same. It's not loading right now, but this is useful if you want to highlight a paragraph that you want, and then you open up a new tab and you begin a new research session and you forget what paragraph you wanted from that article. The highlighter is great because you can just look back and see, oh, this is highlighted. This is what I want to copy and paste. Okay, let's move on to some general tips on researching and brief writing. Okay, the first one is to read books on the topic. I would encourage you to not just look on the internet, but also read books, because you can learn a lot from books that you wouldn't learn online. It goes much more in depth. I remember for my affirmative case, I actually got several books from the library that had to do with my case, and I would actually cut evidence from them, and it was evidence that I could pretty much guarantee no one else had, because almost no one gets evidence from books nowadays. Next is to watch videos on the topic. If you are allowed to go on YouTube, you can search for videos on federal court system, etc. You can't quote videos in a debate round, but you can use it for general knowledge. The next one is Google Alerts. Let's go to that. Alerts.google.com. Google Alerts is similar to news.google.com, and it looks really new now, so I'm not used to this format, but basically you type in your search term, let's say it's plea bargaining, and you click create alert, and you have options, maybe like at most once a week, only the best results, etc. There's some options, and once you create the alert, it'll send you an email every time there's an article written about that topic. And if you choose at most once a week, it'll send you once a week a bunch of articles that were written on that topic. It's really useful for topics that are not written about often and that you're going to forget to check, or your affirmative case. If you want to keep up to date on whatever's happening, then search something specific. Maybe I want to keep up to date on Alaska plea bargaining. And maybe I'm not sure if Yep, it does. So I could ask it to tell me every time an article with a title that includes Alaska and plea bargaining is written. That can be extremely useful because, sure, they're not written often, but you're not going to catch them when they are written, while Google Alerts will tell you. Next is to make sure you don't get too much evidence in your negative briefs. Generally, you don't want to get more than two pieces of evidence that serve the same purpose. And by purpose, I mean not just like evidence on a specific argument, but also a type of evidence. So, for example, you might have 5 pieces of evidence about one disadvantage, but 2 of them are links saying this is why it would happen as a result of their plan. Another 2 are studies, and then the last one is an anecdote. Purposes served by that evidence, and so it's fine that you have 5. But if you have 3 studies that all say the same thing, that's not really useful. It's only going to be useful in a round where that's a major contended point, and evidence is flying back and forth. And that's usually not the case. So try not to overload your brief with evidence, because what will happen is you will read too much in your debate round because you think that you need to read more of your evidence. And so writing briefs with too much evidence causes issues in the future. Lastly, let's talk about writing killer briefs. I'm probably going to do another webinar in the future with less technical difficulties, specifically about this topic, but just a brief overview. I think a good brief should have something called a one-page strategy sheet. And I don't have a one of those right now. I don't have a brief with one of those right now that I can show you, but I'm going to show you the plea bargaining brief I wrote. A one-page strategy sheet is just one page, makes sense, that basically says this is what you should run from this brief. This is the arguments that you should run. This is the evidence that you should use, etc. And a good one-page strategy sheet will completely show the strategy that you need to use, so that you could grab that sheet, you could take it into a debate round with no prep time, and give two good speeches, a 1N and a 2N, based on that. It'll show you the theme that you should take throughout the round. It'll connect the evidence and arguments well so that you are ready to go. That's useful because if you think about something so detailed ahead of time, then you'll do better in round. And if you give it to a friend to use, then they'll have an easier time figuring out your brief and using it. So definitely use one-page strategy sheets. The next one is strategy notes. Write strategy notes and a strategy note is basically just explaining your different arguments and evidence. Explains anything important about those arguments or evidence. Just basically tells your friends who read the brief anything they need to know about using it. I don't know why Word is taking so long. This is supposedly a fast computer, but the next one is include impacts and story cards if possible. So an impact is basically why something matters. Why does this argument matter? If you have evidence that says why it matters, that's useful. But if you don't have evidence, just include something in the text saying, an impact that you can say in round, because impacts are really important for getting the judge to care. Include cards with stories. By card, I mean an evidence quote. Sometimes you need to get into the emotions of the judge in order to win a certain point. And so stories are much better for persuading people and connecting with their emotions than statistics. Statistics are helpful for persuading and saying this is logically why you should vote for something. But if you combine a story and a statistic, you get the best combination. So it's good to have some evidence that is a story. There was a case a couple of years ago that had to do with banning voters from committing voter fraud by using IDs, making sure that voters used IDs. And this voter ID case had a lot of emotion for it because, or the negative side of it had emotion for it because you could say, well, these poor people are not going to be able to vote because of issues with the voter ID. And so that's one way of putting it. Or you could read 3 different stories of people just like you, or grandmas who couldn't vote just because they didn't have a voter ID or whatever. And so you tap into the judge's emotions by reading those stories. All right, the next one is don't settle for the first piece of evidence on a topic that you get. So try to find a piece of evidence that's even better than the ones you have right now. This is still opening, but a good example is the brief I just wrote on plea bargaining. I had a lot of evidence about the Alaska issue, but I wanted a certain one more. How do I put this? I wanted it to say a certain thing. There was something I was looking for, and I hadn't really found it in the evidence. It wasn't concise enough, or it wasn't impactful enough, or maybe the person wasn't an expert. I wanted to find the golden piece of evidence. So I kept looking, and I did find it. So it's important to not settle for the first piece of evidence you find, because oftentimes it's not the best. You can usually find a better one. and at the same time, don't keep both. If you have one piece of evidence that says something and another that says the same but is not as good, just get rid of that one. Lastly, don't give up. You can probably find evidence saying what you need it to say. Just keep searching, keep looking for it, and you'll eventually find it. Well, this brief doesn't want to open up. I'm gonna restart it, see if that changes its mind. Nope, doesn't look like it. I'm gonna quickly change the recording mode here. Let's see. There we go. Now you just see the screen. I think that's pretty much all I wanted to cover. There's probably a couple of things I skipped, but yeah, sorry for the technical difficulties. This webinar wasn't as smooth as I wanted it to be, but I think I covered pretty much everything that was important. The general rule with negative briefs is keep it around 10 to 12 pages. Or a little bit more is better than less for sure, but don't make it too long, because if it's too long, then it's unwieldy, it's hard to use and round. And especially if you have a long one, use a one-page strategy sheet so that you know what to use and round. Plan out your speeches. Don't just go in there assuming that you can plan it out while you're listening, because that's a lot more difficult. Come up with catchphrases and analogies that you can use. Don't just think of what evidence you're going to read, but also how you're going to present the points. A good negative brief can be taken by someone and they can give a 30 speaker point speech with it, and it'll have ethical evidence. That's important. Make sure, I haven't even mentioned ethics really, and that's one of the most important parts of reading or finding evidence. Make sure that when you cut a piece of evidence and you put it in your brief, you have the entire paragraph, not just a part of it, because even if the entire paragraph says something that supports you, but part of it wasn't really relevant, so you don't want to include it, still include it, because you don't want to look like you're trying to hide something. You don't want to hide something, and you don't want to look like you're hiding something. So always include the entire paragraph. Don't cut pieces of evidence that are so tiny, 2 sentences, that the other team can't see what the article is really about. It's important to have a high standard for evidence, because we're in a Christian debate league. We are here to present ourselves as ambassadors for Christ, and we're supposed to be ethical in the way that we present the words of others. Here's another example. If you were to write an article for some kind of newspaper and you were to misquote someone, that can be a serious violation. That can be considered slander, slander, I think, is written, or maybe it's libel. Either way, it can be considered a serious offense. Okay, in the real world, misquoting and unethical use of evidence is a really big deal, and in the NCFCA, it's a big deal as well. So make sure that you are keeping yourself to high standards when you're cutting evidence.
Read the NCFCA ethics guideline.
Read the NCFCA ethics guideline Simon just said. Look at what kind of restrictions they have. There's not much there, but what is there is important. And also include proper citations. Don't inflate the citations either. Don't make up stuff. Only put stuff that you know for sure. Okay, so that's enough about that. I hope this webinar was useful. A recording will be available later, and I'm going to be writing down notes of what we discussed so that you can kind of review like the keyboard shortcuts and all of that. I'll also be sending out the Potent Speaking Brief template to everyone so that you can see that. And yeah, I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you guys later. Thanks.